right, if you've heard that music, folks, you know exactly what's happening right now. It is TV Talk. Welcome to our inaugural episode of season 3. That's right. And this for this show, we've chosen to do season 1 of a very interesting HBO show called True Detective. But before we get into the nuts and bolts of that, plot synopsis and discussion of the characters and the various elements of the show, I want to introduce our very special guest, Kirk Barbera. How are you, man?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. Got my Atlas Shrugged over here. Ready to go?
Yes. Very, very good. And my partners in crime, Jennifer Bouani and Jack Schumann. How you guys doing? Long time no see.
Fabu, Mark.
Hey, what'd you say?
I said Fabu.
Fabu. Very
Fabu.
good. Well, so True Detective. This was the inaugural episode of True Detective, which has gone at 3 seasons and might have a 4th season in the works for 2023 or so. I think I remember reading somewhere. And this particular season was about 2 detectives who follow a murder case in the Louisiana Bayou, and this murder case traverses about a 17-year period of time. Through that time period, they uncover an incredibly deep web of scandal that only you could find in a Southern fried way in Louisiana. And that scandal includes a religion, ritualistic murder, incest. It is the corruption, the moral deviancy and corruption are running fast and furious in Louisiana. And I don't know if this is a particular aspect of True Detective, but not only are you solving the mystery and along with the detectives, but the lives of the detectives themselves are more or less on trial, and we peel away layers of their life while they're solving the crime. And in this case, we have 2 very fine actors, Matthew McConaughey playing the part of Rust Cole, and Woody Harrelson playing Marty Hart. I personally was captivated by Matthew McConaughey the entire time. I guess the general profile for Matthew McConaughey is both of the characters have a cynical edge to them. Both of them have been so terribly affected by their job, but they've gone in very different directions with respect to how they've chosen to deal with, I guess, the stressors and seeing the dark side of life all the time. McConaughey has a very rich history, story narrative that's brought out, has chosen to go into the sort of nihilistic, pessimistic, philosophical route. He's an intellectual. One of his virtues that I find very intriguing is his commitment to truth, his integrity, and his dogged commitment to finding the bad guys. Woody Harrelson, on the other hand, has chosen to compartmentalize his life in such a way as to hold values consciously, but to sabotage those values in other ways. So he exercises his demons in other ways, which he thinks is sort of blowing off steam from the job, or at least that's how he rationalizes it. And of course, it doesn't end well for him in his relationships that way, and it doesn't end well for Matthew McConaughey in that respect. So the season is rife with lots of pithy philosophical conversation about the nature of the universe, the nature of life, hope. What do we have to look forward to? And of course, there's no better place to have that kind of discussion than with the kind of odd couple that Woody Harrelson and Matthew McConaughey represent, where they're in such deep conflict. One guy representing sort of a traditional outlook, and the other guy representing something much more original and interesting. So let's delve into these 2 characters, the characters, the plot, the things that you find interesting about it. There's a lot to find interesting about it, including the end. For folks, there's a spoiler alert here. I mean, it's relentlessly dismal until the very end, and which I think is a very good punchline. Who wants to start first with their feelings and or thoughts about plot, character, and anything with respect to the style of shooting that stood out to you in particular with respect to this interesting series?
Well, I think we should throw our guest under the bus. So I'm going to point the finger. I'm going to point the finger at Kurt. What do you think, Kurt?
Yeah, I mean, I was blown away by Matthew McConaughey's performance. I did think it was something the show itself and the writing was so phenomenal and so captivating as well, that I think like it's a show where the plot pulled me along the first time. I wanted to know what was going on, but even after I saw it, it's one of those shows that really rewards multiple rewatching. And the older I get, the more I have come to appreciate that as the standard of good art, is that even if it has a great twist ending, which is wonderful, but there's a lot of stories where the twist ending, once you get it, that's it. You're done. You had your snack, move on. But this has something where, yeah, there's kind of a twist ending. It's not a big twist. It's just you don't know this, but when you watch it again and you start to delve into who is this character, Rustin Cole, who is Martin Hart, who are these guys that are doing this thing that is necessary. It's a character that's very important in life and in this kind of experience, that there are men in the world like this, right? There are men who have to go out and deal with real evil, face it, confront it face to face. What's going on philosophically and psychologically and intellectually with these people? And I've always turned to detective fiction for that, whether it's, all the way back to Sherlock Holmes, Agatha Christie, Mickey Spillane, and this is a great addition.
Well, Kirk, I wanted to jump on that a little bit, because there is a point during which Matthew McConaughey's character, Russ Cole, reveals that sort of spine where they're talking about being bad men. He's like, we are bad men. And he says something to the effect of, but you need bad men to keep the beasts at the gate, so to speak. And it reminded me of I don't know if you saw Apocalypse Now, but when Colonel Kurtz is finally confronted by his would-be assassin, Kurtz reveals his motivation behind engaging in the unconventional type of warfare that he does. And he talks about what he witnessed in Vietnam was a specific kind of man, a moral man who nonetheless had the capacity to do brutal things to get what to achieve some kind of good. That sounds like an ends justifies the means philosophy, but no, you're right. There are these people who are keeping the barbarians at bay, and in some respects, they are barbarians. I mean, if you think about wolves and sheepdogs, they're not all that different from each other. They're the same breed, but one has just geared their violence in a different way than the other.
Yeah, I would. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jennifer.
I was saying good analogy. And I wanted to piggyback off of what Kirk said, in that the first time I was watching this years ago when it first aired, I enjoyed the mystery of it, because you had Matthew McConaughey in the present, and you've got these two detectives that are interviewing him, and I'm wondering the whole time, is there something to that? Did he do a crime? They're suspicious of him. But the second time around, the ending. And so, deep down, he's a good guy. So you pick up on all of these other nuances, and especially the brotherhood, the unique odd couple dynamic between Cole and Hart. And just, I was able to listen more to their differences of philosophy. And I like what you said, Mark, that Hart compartmentalized he just lives, he's just in on cruise control, just living life like regular guys, I guess, so to speak. And here comes this kind of antisocial dude. When their dynamic, their conversations, then I thought was brilliant casting, between the two of them, because it was so entertaining. So yeah, I agree with you. You really do enjoy this just as much as the first time. And I'm not one of those to watch something or read something more than once very often, but this one was right up there. Good.
We could talk about the story structure in a little bit too, because I thought it was very interestingly told. The nonlinear story form is very interesting. But I was actually talking to Kirk before we got on that in some respects I thought Woody Harrelson was miscast, or at least for a while I thought that, because the character of Marty Hart is pretty cynical. I mean, he's dark too in a lot of ways. I mean, because he has a self-destructive side to him that works against all the values that he claims to hold, and that is a very, very dark place to live. And of course, he has to destroy his entire family through the course of this narrative at a certain point, alienate himself from them. But then I thought, if it didn't have Woody Harrelson's lightness, his essential type of being that we've sort of come to know and love through all of his work, it probably wouldn't have worked, because you need that something, that levity in there that's always behind everything Woody Harrelson does, even when he's really mad or going through terrible things.
Well, there's a line that that Matthew McConaughey, Cole says when they're on their journey, and he says, the difference between us. Do you remember this line? And Woody Harrelson says, what? And then he says, does anybody remember? Denial.
Yeah,
and
denial.
I think that's part of what Cole has come to earlier through some of his interactions, previous life, is an understanding or a view, not an understanding. I don't think he's correct, but it's kind of a view of the narratives that we tell ourselves and how we play out these narratives. And these narratives aren't real. There's something underneath. And of course, at the beginning of the story, you were talking about the non-linear plot structure, but really to me, what was fascinating about it was the perspective of an interview of an older man reflecting on the younger man, because it allows you to have the unreliable narrator issue, right? And so there's this whole thing about, Martin is lying to himself and his wife and everything, but I think to some degree at the time when he's younger, he believes that, yeah, I'm a cop, I do bad things, and I have to sleep with women to blow off steam so I can raise a family, because that's what you're supposed to do. And Rust really understands, yeah, you're full of it, dude. And you just have to understand you're full of it. That's not true. And you need to become you need to get in accordance with yourself and who you are, really.
And I do like that.
They are polar opposites when it comes to honesty with themselves. Woody Harrelson's character is a complete evader, a self-evader, and McConaughey's character is very honest with himself. And I was going to ask if McConaughey, if Rust is a nihilist, is Hart some kind of whim worshipping pragmatist? What would we characterize his philosophy as?
I would definitely see Hart as a type of pragmatist. I mean, but he does hold certain values as sort of as sacrosanct. I mean, he does. It's just that he can't. He'll go with his impulse. I think when it comes to his impulse can overwhelm some of those values at times. But I would definitely call him a pragmatist.
He has a very conflicting moral code, right?
He's cheating on his wife, but there was this moment when he goes back to his wife in the present day, and you see that he made that choice to be loyal to Russ after he realized that the two of them are the only ones who can save these victims.
Yeah, I think that goes to a deeper theme of what the author's trying to convey, right?
Go ahead. Well, what do you think?
Well, I'm just saying, he starts to see that, he's betrayed a lot of what he's thought was, like what Mark was saying, he upheld as family values and things like that. This is a part of his character that has never really believed in those. It was kind of facade. I don't know if maybe you don't agree with that. I don't really see evidence that he actually believed in it, other than that's what you're supposed to do. And one example is they go to the hillbilly bunny ranch, and he meets that young girl that's underage prostitute, and he gets all uppity about it. And they tell that whole line about men like you don't understand because you don't have control over the sex. That's the only reason why you're getting upset now. And then he gives the girl money and says, find another line of work. And then Matthew, the tax man, I did want to talk about his character as the tax man. I think that's a great line of him. He's always in his ledger taking great notes and observations. He says, was that a down payment?
Yeah.
That's the line he says. And And
And
like,
it turns out to be sort of true.
and it turns out to be true, right? And he's, and it's just such a great connection between like this guy who's trying to play this, like, I'm a Christian, I'm a good guy doing the right thing with my family, and you don't mess with that. And then this other guy who's, he's the one who's actually really contemplating life and things like that. He stares at a cross. He just stares at it and contemplates his own sacrifice in the, like Jesus. That's what he says.
I thought it was a mirror, like a post.
It's a mirror in a cross.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, there's like a little mirror within, but he like stands in front of the cross.
The eye that's like only as big as his eye, right?
Yeah, exactly. And he stands there for like an hour. And he says he contemplates it's very Jordan Peterson-y. He contemplates himself in the garden, willingly accepting his sacrifice like Jesus did.
Well,
you just said something very interesting, Kirk. It's very Jordan Peterson-y. I do think that Rustin Cole is a Jordan Peterson type hero.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he's especially as
for sure.
We've been hearing all over. I don't know why it keeps coming up on my TikTok and stuff, but the soundbite of Jordan Peterson talking about being dangerous. Be a dangerous person.
That too.
And he was like, I think Stossel just interviewed him, and he was like, why be dangerous? And he's like, it doesn't mean you have to act on that, but it means you have to be prepared to be dangerous and to be violent. And it's the whole, the guardians at the gate and the monsters, the monsters guarding the monsters. But I guess it's interesting because how do you guys think that meshes with like objectivism in general? Do you think that
I'm not unsympathetic to it. I have to be honest with you. I am not unsympathetic to it. I do think a man has to be ready to be brutal. I'm an outlier in the objectivist community, but particularly the way the culture is going, you do have to be prepared to defend your values. I think we objectivists might, Kirk and Jennifer and Jax, you could contradict me, but we might call it something different. We might say, I just have to be prepared to defend my values, and that's what I'm going to do. That's an acknowledgement of what's out there, and I wouldn't focus on it as an essential component of my manhood the way Jordan Peterson does, but I would say it's definitely an aspect of what I think a man needs to be a man. What say you folks?
I say it's comforting to know that there are men that think like that, so that I don't have to as a woman.
And the show definitely deal. Oh, sorry, Jax. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, as a woman, I guess I tend to be more like Dagny in terms of I'll pick up a gun and shoot if I need to. I will, in order to protect what's important to me, I'll be violent. But I agree with Jennifer. It is comforting to know that there are men that are prepared to be violent, so that I don't necessarily have to be, but I'm just as prepared to be violent too. I think it's on individuals to be prepared to defend themselves. And I don't think that is, pardon?
Depends on how bad it gets.
Right. But I don't think
there's a mama bear instinct in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think that it contradicts the tenets of objectivism, because when you see, in Atlas Shrugged and in The Fountainhead, there are many violent acts that her heroes do in defense of their values, right? But that's what it is to be dangerous. You are you're defending your values and the things that are most important to you.
What say you, Kirk?
Yeah, I guess I'm curious why there would even be a question that that objectivism or the philosophy would have any contradiction about defending your values, because that seems to be, I agree with you, that seems to be a core thing. Maybe the issue could be something like, and I'm not an expert at all in this in objectivism. I do my best to understand it, but just something along the lines of like, what they're conveying is a metaphysical value, is what to masculinity. And there may be something there, and there's definitely for me something there to discuss. I agree with all of you, by the way. I built my own gym. I like training to fight. I like doing, I like that stuff because I think it, as a personal thing rather than a metaphysical, like this is what it means to be masculine man based on the facts of biology or something like that. That's where I think it comes a little trickier on a philosophical level. But there's definitely something self-esteem, confidence-wise, in the way that you walk into a bar and you're not afraid of everybody. Like I can imagine. I try to write scenes or whatever. I'm a writer sometimes, and I try to think about like what it would feel like, because I'm a decently sized guy. I'm 6 foot, 300 pounds. Like I walk into a bar, I'm not really freaking out about guys around me and being afraid. And there's a confidence that comes from that, right? And I think there's that aspect is true. I guess I just don't know if I would say the fact of biology of human male leads to the value of being brutal, and that's the disconnect in my mind.
I don't know if Jordan thinks that, but he certainly thinks that he holds violence as a very high value in masculinity, the potential for violence, and that it should be there, and that it should be just barely controlled, by your sense of what's right. And I just don't like that view of men in a way, but there's an aspect of it that I find very intriguing and in alignment with my own sense of what one should do. You should have the capacity for violence, and I think that the bad people in the world sort of only understand that capacity, and and having the capacity is often enough to diffuse some of the craziness out there. That's sorry.
Oh no, I was just going to say we have we do have a couple of super chats, so I wanted to get to those. One is one I kind of wanted to bring us back a little bit to the plot of True Detective. Allie for $4.99, thank you, Allie. Says the whole occult is based off the book King in Yellow by Robert Chambers. If you read the book, you see everything. There are even quotes. So what she's talking about is the whole occult of the plot of the show, right? And I can't remember what the guy's name, oh God, what was something with the C? I want to say Kaiser Sose, but it's not.
For what? I
forget the name of the king. I forget the name of the Yellow King.
Oh, the king.
Yeah, the Yellow King name. But
Carcosa?
Carcosa. Carcosa, that's right. Carcosa. So
that's someone in the chat just told us.
Thank you. I think what's so great about this show in general is you've got this fantastic story of these two men, the odd couple of true crime. And you've got a brilliant plot at the same time that is, and so both, and it's not super fast paced, it does take you a minute to kind of get into it and get drawn in. And I think it was maybe by the end of episode, maybe it was the end of episode 1, or maybe it was the end of episode 2. I wasn't really hooked until I saw the half naked guy, running in the field with a gas mask. Looking like an elephant.
I think that's like 3.
It wasn't until I watched it again this time with my daughter, and it wasn't until then. I like watching stuff again with my daughter because I just like to watch her and watch her reactions to things.
I love reaction videos.
Total stalker mom. That was the moment where she was like, "Oh my God, next episode."
Yeah, that was a heck of a cliffhanger for sure.
I enjoyed this from the very beginning because wasn't this one of Matthew McConaughey's first performances on television?
I think it probably was. I think it was his first TV appearance.
I was just drawn in from him from the very beginning. He was so interesting to me.
What I like about it, I love mysteries, number one, and I like that this was told in different timelines. So when you see when you see the interview, it's you don't know what that is. It's something you don't know why they're interviewing. It's a slow reveal over time that they suspect him of these various crimes. And as you unfold the relationship between these two guys, it's really sort of the love story of the show, are these two guys in a sense who are antagonists throughout the great majority of it, which adds a great deal of dynamic tension in the interview, because you don't know if one of them is going to crack and betray the other, or if one is actually a suspect in doing some of the stuff, because they both have the types of personalities that you could suspect would go all the way over to the dark side. So it reveals mysteries, not only of who the killer is, but who these two human beings are, and what the interview is, and how these men are going to, whether their loyalty is going to hold out or not, because horrible things happen between these two guys. And at any point, one of them could say, what do I have to, I don't have to protect this guy. I don't have to stand up for this guy. I don't have to be his partner. And so that makes the union at the end. And then the final, of course, the coup de grace,
let me ask you this, everybody, and Mark, and why do you think they do stick? Like, you talked about the friendship, but why do you think they do stick together? What's the glue, in a sense, that the story has? Is it just because he's a friend, or is there, what's that?
I think it's justice.
Okay.
Well,
Because,
I don't.
because when Hart goes to, he was getting ready to like kick his ass because of the history between them. But when he sits down in this moment actually was an interesting cinematography moment that we shared with our director on the short we just did. But when he shares that film of like what's really going on, that this is at some higher levels in the state.
Oh my God. Yeah.
That changed him. And that
changed me.
What was that?
Yeah.
It changed me as a human too. Like, it was just so impactful.
You have that focus on and we watched it again. Jennifer and I watched it again together when we were actually filming. They're in the storage room, and you have that moment where the focus is entirely on McConaughey reacting to Woody Harrelson seeing this horrific video for the first time. And I love that they don't show the video, right? They only show like the first part of it, and you see the horror in Woody Harrelson's face, but everything is he's blurred out, kind of in the background, and he's just, and then you see this expression on McConaughey, like, yes, and that is where they bond. There, it's like, I would say that it's both justice and an absolute horror at injustice.
I think that's where the narrative drops from Woody completely, right? That's such a good acting moment where it's like everything faded away, like all the BS that he had before, and all the stuff, the narratives, as I think that he had in his mind before that, all of a sudden it's gone, and there's just justice, and that's all that therefore that's their full purpose, like their clearest purpose of, we got to kill this MFer, and that's it.
Yeah, so that I think is what cements them in the climax. Once the bullshit falls away, once all the facades, and we see the facade of religiosity, of sanctimoniousness, of charity, everything is collapsed to the ground in this heap of ritualistic, sadistic horror that's really going on underneath it. And it also collapses those facades in Woody Harrelson's character, and Matthew and him come together sort of as equals for the first time. But before that, I mean, it's episode 8. Before that, what keeps them together? I mean, I think that's a very interesting.
That is a good question.
A very interesting question. Jennifer, do you still maintain justice, or do you say something else? Clearly, they have a murder that they are both covering up when Woody Harrelson lost his mind and blew that guy's brains out. By the way, unbelievable special effects, because those are the most realistic shootings I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
I mean, horrific. But they have that, where they protected each other on that first grab in 95.
That's true.
Where Woody lost his mind, murdered the guy, and then his partner ended up, staging the scene for him. And so they have that over on each other. Now, as the years pass, McConaughey gets the reputation for being a great interrogator. and both of their reputations rise as a result of McConaughey. In fact, they have a confrontation where he tells him, type up this 40 pages of confession.
Yeah.
And the guy's like, what am I, your bitch? Practically. And he's like, you know, I could just walk. He's like, there is no you without me. And he just goes, type up the damn thing. But and I love those interrogations because he plays the devil and angel at the same time. And once he gets the confession, this is where you see this principle of hard justice come up, but it's a dark edged Jordan Peterson type of justice where he tells them exactly what's going to happen to them. It's like he lures them in, makes them think that their confession will be the best thing that could ever happen to him, but what he's done is he's packaged the door to hell in something else and reveals that they're going to hell right as they're just going over the cliff, which I thought was a interesting character touch. It's frightening, like in its cruelty and intensity, and almost like, I don't know if you guys ever read the book Seawolf. Did you ever read the book Seawolf by Jack London?
No.
Well, they did.
I've read some Jack London.
Yeah, well, the captain in that he's like a strong man. He's like a Nietzschean strong man, extremely literate and very powerful physically, unstoppable force of nature. And that's the type of character I see in those interview sessions with Matthew McConaughey. We're just relentlessly pursuing justice, and he's going to punish you. He's going to get you and hurt you.
So what is it that you think, Mark, is the glue that holds them together before they get to their journey of justice?
I think that's animating McConaughey the whole time. I mean, I think that's I don't think he sees anything else in life that's worth living for. I think Hart stays with him because it's practical, because it's doing good things for his career. He doesn't like him. He doesn't like him through the whole thing. He defends him, he sticks up for them, but one might think, well, he does a lot of things as a show, as a posture, because he thinks he has to, because he thinks that's what one is supposed to do. But I think, there's a murder keeping them together. There's Woody Harrelson's career. There's the facade of the career, even though McConaughey's carrying him on his shoulders. And then finally, justice. I do think in the end, Hart has a deep sense of particular rights and wrongs, like a visceral sense of a good and evil that does animate him at times, right? To beat up the boys who mess with his daughter. I mean, there's a deep sense of like, you crossing a line. I may be able to cross lines, you can't. This is, you know what I mean?
It's interesting. I wonder if there's a kind of magnetic attraction between the two of them that's almost like the opposite magnets. It pushes them apart and pulls them together at the same time. I think that I was about to say that Rust didn't need Hart as much as Hart needed Rust, but in a way, I think Rust did need Hart, because there was something that Hart brought to Rust's life that Rust was missing before, right? What's the inciting incident? Obviously, are the murders, but the inciting incident for these two men to kind of be joined together is this thing that each of them bring to the table that the other is lacking. And I think that for Rust, what is lacking for him is because he lost his daughter, and he lost his family. And there's this wonderful family that Hart has that he doesn't appreciate, right? That he absolutely doesn't appreciate. And the first time that Rust opens up is, at dinner time, right? When he's, when the wife is, asking him all these questions. And I think that, Woody Harrelson's character, Hart, comes in later and he's like, he told you all that? Like, how did he do that? And she's like, well, I asked him. Like, do you ever ask him questions? And then I think that Hart is just, I don't think Hart has ever met a person like Rust before in his life, ever. And it freaks him the hell out. And that's what's great about Woody Harrelson as an actor and as having been a comedic actor as well. I will always say till my dying day that some of the best dramatic actors are former comedians or have a lot of experience in comedy.
That's absolutely true. But there's a line in, I don't know if you ever saw the movie Punchline with Sally Field and Tom Hanks.
Yeah, a long time ago.
Sally Fields plays a comedian who sort of bombs, and she's trying to break into the business, and Tom Hanks is sort of her mentor. And he says something like, "You want to know the key to being funny?" And she says, "Yes. What is the key to being funny?" He's like, "Don't think anything's funny." And it's like every comedian I know has this extremely dark edge to them, but they're highly intelligent at the same time. You combine that understanding for darkness. Watch, I mean, Bill Hader, watch his work in Barry. I mean, he's amazing. And watch him in the Skeleton Twins. You want to see a great movie, well acted, watch him. I mean, Billy Crystal was amazing when he was working.
What they do with their timing and their facial expression. I mean, one of the funniest scenes to me in True Detective was when Hart comes home to Rust having mowed his lawn. Like the absolute. I mean, if there's any worse metaphor of, trying to get in on his wife, you mowed my lawn. What the hell were you thinking?
That's true too. Yeah, that was a funny moment. I love.
Well, and it's also like a reflection of his own anxieties, because his guilt, because he's cheating, and you tend to suspect people more. Yeah, he's doing that himself, right? I'm curious, like, because of what you're saying, Jax, also like at that dinner table where they had that conversation with the wife and the revealing of the daughter being having been killed, there's a revelation about a fundamental difference between the two cops as cops. One did something, one has done something, one hasn't. And I think that's very critical to their worldviews. And the thing that Cole has done is he's pulled the trigger on his gun before, and the other one has never done that. And there's something about the being fully confronted with evil that I think is fundamental to this whole show, right? That because like we were saying earlier in season 8, that's when, and really it does, I think, happen earlier because Woody Harrelson's character does eventually kill somebody in like episode 3, and then they lie about it, right? And they build this narrative about the story, and they get rewarded for it, and all these things like that. And I think that also is part of what brings them together. Mark, Lee, you're talking about for the next part of their journey, and then eventually breaks them apart once the family narrative.
It also becomes part of the bargain later on when they have the drink and when they seal the deal where they're when Cole is going to take Hart to look at the treasure trove of evidence he has. The way he gets him is, "You owe me. There's a debt between the two of us that you got to pay." I love that. That's a sense of justice that's very deep. But I do want to say something with that direct confrontation with evil. You're right. It does change you. You can talk all you want, but when you actually get in the mix with this kind of stuff, it will change you. I remember I stopped a robbery one time with a gun, and I trained pretty extensively in firearms. And I had the guy in my front sight and told him to stop, which he listened to me. Not at first, but he finally did, because my girlfriend yelled down to him and said, "He'll kill you." And so he stopped. But I had that front sight on his chest, a 45 caliber firearm, and I knew that I would kill him if I had to. If he took one more step towards me, I was going to kill him. That changed my whole life. In that moment, I knew, oh shit, I could do that if I have to. And I didn't know that before. And that's McConaughey's character, Cole, has gone to hell. He's descended into hell. He's had to kill people before. And that changes a man.
So there's a quote I wanted to read you guys from Paradise Lost. I don't know if it's quoted here, but they do quote some of this stuff, a little bit. And it's, "The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven." And one of the things I thought was so beautiful aesthetically, not necessarily a world I'd really want to live in, but the cinematography of the vast landscapes in the Louisiana swamps and, along the river and along the ocean or whatever. And how the teeny little drops of humanity in this area that was shown. Right. And I thought that was just such a wonderful aspect of like, and then it, the story goes into its own head, or the narrative goes into the heads of these characters as they're playing out this drama on this landscape, this vast empty landscape of nature and humanity, and making your way in this world, which reminded me of Westerns, but on the Louisiana swamp. But anyway.
You're right. The landscape was daunting, and it was another character in the piece at times, especially when they're going from one place to another. When you see the scope of this empty swamp that just goes on forever, with, you're right, little pieces of human development in the midst of wildness, like savage wildness, like that wetland is savagely wild, and they're in it.
Jackson.
So Kirk, you said earlier that you had an acting question. I'm curious to know what that is.
Okay, I'll ask. I think Jax had a couple super chats she wanted to read, and then I do have an acting question for you.
Let me get through there not that many, but Walter Bishak for 2 years we got, he said we got another 4 Musketeers. That would be us, folks. Thank you, Walter. And then Planet Pellegrino for 10 pounds in support. Thank you. And then Allie for $4.99 again. Carcosa is that ruined cave thing that Cole was stuck in when he was looking up at the light. When stuck in the dark, speculated he was hallucinating. And that was actually kind of another interesting aspect of Cole after he had lived, gone through all those years where he was, doing all kinds of drugs, and his eyesight, you're given to understand that his eyesight is kind of like permanently damaged. And so sometimes he sees things that just aren't there, and like, lots of lights and stuff. And that was a really
he has a sensory crossover where he can taste colors, and he can and stuff. So there's an interesting synapse switch that has happened in his brain because of his experiences, which makes him also a very interesting detective, because that sensory ability comes back again once they start getting back on the trail of the real killer, which I thought was very interesting.
And I loved how they introduced the killer in the early episodes, and you just walk right on by it, and Russ' character wanted to talk to him more, but Hart was like, come on, what are you waiting for? And they do a really great job of shading his scars until that one scene, where he's like on the side of the school building painting, and you can very clearly see all the scars on his face.
They do it on the reveal before that. They do it on the reveal.
When he's on the lawnmower.
Before that, when the cops are asking for directions, which all of those are brilliant. The planting of the seed early on, and which comes back in the final episode when Cole realizes that he talked to the fucking killer in '95 and could have stopped it. And then when the law asks for directions to Highway 41, and that when the killer you don't see the scar until he turns into the sunlight and it glistens off of his face. You're like, wow,
so good.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was a great reveal. I was going to say something else, but now I've forgotten what I was going to say.
Do we have time for the acting question, or?
Yeah.
We're running out of time.
We have time. Because we started at 2:15. We can go until as long as Daniel, our producer, is okay with that. If we can go.
I also want to talk about the punchline of the season, because I thought it was very needed. So we should talk about that, because I think objectivists would look at this as
let's talk about that then.
Yeah. Let's talk about that, and then we'll do the acting question after that.
Yeah, if there's time.
So I mean, Cole's character has a near-death experience. He comes about as close to death as anyone can. When he fights the monster at the end, the monster nearly kills him, and you think he probably does. And they bait you in the story a little bit so that you think he is dead. You find out he's in a coma, but in that coma, he describes his near-death experience where he has the sensation of of being in the presence of his daughter and being in the presence of his father, and finally connecting with this universal sense of, I mean, it's a religious experience where he finally understands that perhaps the things that these crazy religious nuts have been saying, that you don't die, you never really die, there might be some truth to it. And so that provides a bit of a light at the end of the tunnel, and it gives a little bit of force to an analogy he makes, as Woody Harrelson's talking about stars and darkness. Cole's character says something like, at one time it was all darkness, but now the light is winning. He says something about the light winning. I don't remember the exact quote. It's a pretty cool quote. I don't know if anybody.
The whole ending speech. Is that what
the whole speech is cool. They're describing his near-death experience, but then the punchline of it all, as he's being wheeled away, is that the light is winning. It's something very uncharacteristic of him. To me, that's an arc to the character that was totally unexpected. He did a complete flip, and I feel like he is going to rise from the ashes and be someone completely different from that point on. Yeah.
Once there's only dark, you asked me, the light's winning. You're right.
Yeah.
That's the very last line of the show, and then it goes to the stars. And yeah, I mean, I think it's very religious. I brought up Paradise Lost because I'm actually reading that in one of the reading groups I'm doing. We're doing Paradise Lost, so I've been thinking about that a lot, and I think it's very religious. This True Detective is very religious, and and again, I'm not a philosopher, I'm not an expert on philosophy and the history, but I do understand that the question of how do you get out of pessimism and cynicism, like how do you exit that experience? Cole at one point says that, and I wrote this one down, human consciousness is a mistake. We are a creation of nature, separated from nature. This is in his younger years, separated from nature and not a part of it. And, there's that view that he has of human nature and like he says, we should go hand in hand as brothers and sisters into the dark. And basically he wants all of humanity, all of human consciousness to exit life, to kill themselves because they're not worthy, and really because all of life is suffering. And it's a real problem. This, if you take the philosophy of the problem of evil, it's a real problem, right? If you really take consciousness and life seriously, that there's real evil in the world. And if there's an all-knowing, all-loving God, why does this happen? Why did he even create us? Why is all that type of thing happening? And he goes through an existential crisis in his younger years. And I think, Mark, what you're saying is the arc of his character that I saw that was fascinating was, even though I don't agree philosophically with it, is that he comes out the other end religious. And the key to me,
he goes from hopeless to hopeful.
But I think it's because of religion. So to me, the key here is there's a quote I read earlier and I found it. I contemplate the moment in the garden, the idea of allowing your own crucifixion. And if you remember what happens in the end, when he confronts at Carcosa, he goes through this tree. And again, if you look at a lot of iconography and paintings of this is Paradise Lost, of how people used to paint the paradise, that I think that's what he's doing when he's going into Carcosa. He's going into his Eden, and then he's even like lifted up when he's stabbed, right? He's literally stabbed like Jesus in the story, and he literally kind of dies like Jesus in the story, and then he
it's almost like an ascension. It's almost like an ascension.
Like an ascension, exactly. And then he's lying there looking through the tunnel into heaven, right? And that's, I think that's part of what happens. He finds his hopefulness, but again, this is a pretty traditional story, but really well told in terms of finding religion. This is what Jordan Peterson wants all of us to have.
Exactly. I was going to say that. It really does give us that false dichotomy of there's either this pragmatism, or there's either religion or there's hopelessness. There's either, and that's the choice that you're left with. And we as objectivists say that's
why we need Atlas Shrugged.
Sort of dies as a sinner and is resurrected as the Son of God, right? If you look at it that way. We have one more super chat from Allie. Okay, so so for $4.99, do y'all think that Cole tells his partner's wife the things he does so his partner, so Hart, would straight up focus on the case. And I asked for an example of that. And so she was saying the whole scene where Cole was talking to Hart's wife to get the two of them back together.
Yeah, that's exactly what he does. He gives Hart false hope so that, I mean, he knows when he has the meeting with the wife that there's no possibility they're going to get back together. But he doesn't want his partner distracted. He is singularly focused, and so he lies because it's the right thing to do if they're going to get the bad guy.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Do you want to ask an acting question real fast before we sign off? Because I'm intrigued in
Well, okay, I'll try to make it as quick as possible. So this is the scene after the autopsy in episode 1. And there's a lot of scenes like this, but I'm just picking this example as one example. Is they're walking out of the autopsy scene. So they just learned a little bit more about what's going on. She was drugged, raped, all that stuff. And they're walking out and they're in a strip mall, and it's a great cinematography of where they are. And Coles has this line when he gets to the door, to the car. This place is like someone's memory of a town, and the town is fading. And then, so what I thought is, I've, like I said, I'm a writer. I do a lot of fiction, particularly short stories and things like that. And I think I could write and pull off a literary story that has a line like that, where a character quotes a line like that. But how the hell do you pull it off as an actor where it doesn't sound like so ridiculous? Because it's the most, like, who talks like that, right? Like who says stuff like, how do you pull that off? But he pulls it off so beautifully. It's so like his character would say shit like that. And one of the next lines that Woody Harrelson says is, "Stop saying shit like that. It's unprofessional." It's such a great, but it's just like, who taught, like the way he talks is so.
There are times when I'm like, turn this pedantic motherfucker off.
Yeah. But he pulls it off.
But
he pulls it off. How?
Well, I think he's got the shoulders to do it. There are some actors who couldn't pull that off because they're just not interesting enough. But I think what he's done his homework so that every moment is alive. He's really engaged in what he's doing. Not all actors can do that. And because he's caught up in the problem, you get caught up in the problem. And even though a lot of the stuff he says is pretentious as shit, like that's a pretentious fucking moment. Yeah. But there's a lot there's a lot working on us at that time. What we know about him up to that time, the relationship of that up to that time, the stark strip mall. I mean, I'm trying to think of that painter. I can't think of the painter right now. There's a stark sort of surrealistic background. It almost looks like something out of a Camus story. It really is strange. And so when he says it, it doesn't quite come off as, as hyperbole. It doesn't come off as like just pretentious. It sort of fits. You're like, yeah, you're sort of
right. It does. Yeah.
I think he's earned it though, not just being Matthew McConaughey. But even if he was a nobody, or we'd never seen that actor before, he's earned it by embodying his character fully. So that when he does say it, you're like, yeah, Russ would say something like that. He's and there are a few actors I think that do a brilliant job of being able to speechify in those kinds of ways. One of them that comes to mind from a show, 2 shows that we've done. One is from Justified. Walton Goggins, who played Boyd Crowder, had such an amazing. He would speechify and he would say the most crazy things. But you're like, that's Boyd Crowder. He can say it because he's got those big old flashy white teeth and he was a preacher. He was preaching. So you sort of bought it. You bought the event. That, and then Chuck Rose from Billions.
Yeah.
Who he was Shakespearean in his speeches, absolutely Shakespearean. And you were just like jaw on the ground, but that's who he was.
On the other hand, Jackson and I would write this character for the short we just did, who was supposed to be kind of a little over the top, a little melodramatic towards the climax. And in the scene, he wasn't pulling it off. We were in there rewriting it. Scratch it, forget it.
Yeah.
Just go with something more natural. Yeah.
Well, at first I was going to give this a little thumb sideways because there were elements of it that I absolutely loved. I loved the acting. There were elements of the story I loved in the cinematography that I thought was great. But the darkness of the story sort of pulled me down. Even with that punchline at the end, it was so relentlessly dark, such relentlessly flawed characters that I almost gave it a thumb sideways. But as we've been rooting out, some of the story elements and discussing the complex characters more, I give this one a thumbs up. I think it's a very interesting story. It doesn't say anything new. For us objectivists, I mean, it's culturally disappointing in a sense because it's just saying what the cult is regurgitating some of the same old philosophies that we've heard over and over again. But it does it very well and very originally. So for me, it gets a thumbs up. You guys, what do you guys think?
Yeah.
Yep, thumbs up.
I give it a thumbs up. I also want to give a special shout out to the writer, Nick Pizzolatto, he actually wrote the book that this was based on. And he, not only that, but he was, after HBO optioned the book, they actually made him the showrunner of True Detective. So this man was and it's very, very abnormal for that to happen. He was a first-time showrunner of the series that he wrote the book for, and then wrote the screenplays for as well. So very, very talented person. And the writing in this was just phenomenal. It was so great.
Yeah, very good. So all of us give it a thumbs up. So I have to make some special announcements here before we conclude our inaugural episode for season 3. Tomorrow at 5 p.m. UK time, the trial of Just Stop Oil, where Ayn Rand Center UK platinum level and above members will be acting as jurors. I'm so happy that this terrorist organization is being put on trial. The defendant will be Rosie Ginsburg, the great emperor himself. The defense attorney, Matthew Humphreys. The prosecutor, the great James Valiant. And the eyewitness, Mark Pellegrino. I will be an eyewitness to the horrors of Just Stop Oil. And I hope James Valiant gets a conviction. So
is it something that everybody can watch, or do you have to be a
this is just for platinum level and above members? I think at the beginning of the show, they will be announcing the verdict of the last mock trial. So that will be interesting for folks. So if you're in that level, tune in, for all of that. And I think it's going to be very interesting. I've never been a party to something like this before, so I don't know how long it's going to go, what it's going to do, or what. It's going to be very interesting. All right, so
cool idea.
Thank you very much, Kirk, for joining us on our inaugural episode of
Thanks
TV
for having
Talk.
me.
And
I wanted to say thank you to Kirk too, because you really brought some really interesting points that I don't think any of us thought about, and I like your literary background. That was really awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
yes, Kirk, you are the man to talk about art. I love talking with you about art. It's always a very illuminating experience for me. So, folks,
do we want to announce our next show? Do we know what it's going to be, folks?
I have no idea what it's going to be. If you have an idea, then go ahead.
Well, I think we were talking about Succession, weren't we?
Oh, were we? Okay.
Either that or Severance.
Oh, Severance is only one season, though, right?
Yeah, Severance is only one season.
Let's do Severance first.
Okay. All right.
Do you guys ever do movies? What about like Oppenheimer?
Yes, now that'll be an interesting thing. We're
going to do that on the Daily Collective, I think.
Okay.
Because this is called TV Talk.
Yeah, that's true.
So we do
But
TV.
yeah, I think next Daily Collective on Thursday, we're going to do Barbenheimer.
Okay.
So we'll do both the Barbie movie and Oppenheimer. So I'm not sure. Yeah, you should watch. I recommend watching both movies because they're interesting to diagnose. So, but yeah, okay. So we're going to do Severance is our next TV talk, which is on Apple TV, I believe.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, folks, you heard it here. Severance is the next one. And always remember to check your premises, and we will see you next time. Peace.
Bye.